Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Webcast Wednesday. My name is Avni Gala, and I'm the marketing manager here at FinTech. Today, Webcast Wednesday invites you to a special presentation in which Amika Megdahru from Fortinet will help us learn about Fortinet Security Fabric, security without compromise. So let's look at today's agenda. So for those who are new here, I'm going to do a little introduction on FinTech. Then we're going to do our today's presentation by Amika, followed by Q&A. And finally, we are going to do our two drawings for $25 Amazon gift card. So for those who are not familiar with FinTech, we are a value-added distributor that specializes specifically in network security and IT security solutions. We work with Fortinet, Air Networks, AlgoSec, Bedford Networks, Exablocks, which is now StorageCraft, and Recmount IT. So these are the companies we distribute products of. And the services that we provide include inventory. So we are one of the value-added distributors that would hold inventory for customers well built. We provide financing. We give you flexible payment methods. We do sales support from initial quote to close. Any marketing support like events, webinars, advertising campaigns, and technical services from demo to deployment. So if you need an extra hand, we supply a hand to the demand. So that's about us. And before I forward it to our presenter today, let me brief you on his bio and what the webinar will cover. So Amika is a systems engineer based out of Fortinet's headquarters. He serves as a technical resource for the inside sales, channel sales, and DMR teams while covering Fortinet's Fabric and enhanced technology products. And in today's webinar, he will talk about how the Fortinet Security Fabric gives you control, integration, and easy management of security across your entire organization from IoT to the cloud. So without further ado, I'm going to now hand it over to Amika to further explore the subject.
Thank you very much, Avani. Just give me one quick second here. Let me share my screen.
Sure.
All right. Is my screen coming up okay?
Yes.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining. Like Avani mentioned, I'm one of the system engineers here out of Sunnyvale office, primarily working with our inside sales team, DMR team, and a national team. Today's webinar will be covering Fortinet Security Fabric, pretty much at a high level, looking at what Fortinet brings to bear in the security industry and how we pretty much provide a fine grained security posture for our customer, for the industry, and the framework that other vendors are pretty much emulating. So for some reason, it's not letting me skip the slides, Avani. Can you skip the slides for me? Oh, there you go.
You can, yeah.
Okay. So, primarily this is the agenda for today, quick introduction. Then we're going to cover some of the challenges, that we are addressing, with Fortinet Security Fabric and how that vision is being realized. And we'll do a little, dive into, threat intelligence, how we, provide valued services, in terms of security and not, compromising either security performance or performance with security. So the three common challenges that we find our enterprise customers usually wrestling with, especially as they are trying to enable digital services or business services, it's pretty much we are realizing the evolving security landscape as it pertains to where you define the edge of your network, where you define certain parameters within your network. So these days that definition is really expanding. There are certain things that you have to address as a system engineer or as a network engineer as it relates to security as it relates to infrastructure and as it relates to compliance. You'd have, probably some solution, up in the cloud, private cloud, public cloud. You have IoT devices, you have BYOD devices. You need to ensure that those devices are staying within, the framework of the security posture, and at the same time, you want to make sure that, your users are having, very good, IT experience, especially when they have, certain business applications that they need to access, or even when they are on the road traveling and they need to like save VPN into your network. There are certain, variables that you need to account for and ensure that you provide some of these IT services, and at the same time ensure that, people are not susceptible to, several mishaps, or probably certain, security loopholes, especially, when they are either within, a non-protected network, or, a well-trusted network. So these are some of the questions, that system engineers are trying to address. And of course, this is just kind of like a framework that highlights, some of the requirements of framework that NIST, that has put out there in terms of, how we identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from certain, threat incidences. And the good thing about our solution is, we address, all these questions. If you're talking about, identifying threats, we have, certain sensors within our devices that has the ability to, scan your network, look out for vulnerabilities, exploits. Also, we have a sandbox solution, that can, look into blind spots within your network, try to identify any sort of like zero-day threats or any sort of like indicator of compromise and alert you to that behavior itself, right? In terms of protection, you can easily deploy, firewalls, in a network segmentation manner whereby you can segregate certain resources that exist within your infrastructure, and this is not just protecting you, at the network layer. You're talking about, both at the access layer. We have solutions such as our switches, our access points, that gives you that granular visibility into those assets, or into people who are coming out of, guest Wi-Fi networks, or even into people who are hooking up into, some access VLANs or switches. You have that visibility from a single pane of glass, and you can take the necessary steps, to protect your network if there's any sort of like, mishap or havoc that occurs. We also have, several sensors in terms of our Forti client. If you're talking about antivirus protection, antivirus will do half of the job, but beyond that, like I mentioned earlier, we have our ATP framework that includes, several point solutions that share global intelligence with each other. So you're talking about, looking into our IPS sensors, our AV, client, our sandbox detection, and pretty much sharing that intelligence with each other. Recently, I'm pretty sure most of us we were aware of the WannaCry outbreak. And the good thing, about our FortiGuard team was that even before variants of WannaCry was, pretty much prevalent, we had already created an IPS signature for the very first, variant of that sample itself. So our customers were properly protected, and even when several variants of WannaCry, start spreading out, we had the ability to detect those and block them at the same time because of our sandboxing, technology that can look into several malware markers or malware attributes and pretty much apply the necessary, mitigation actions to certain, malformed behavior. So not only, can we detect these behaviors, we can also respond, like I mentioned. We can push out signatures, right? We can push out updates on the fly to all our devices. Reason being, everything we do is under one umbrella, under the FortiGuard team, whose primary, you know, um, job around the clock is to push out all these definitions to our boxes, right? Ensuring that all our devices well protected, around the landscape. In terms of recovery, pretty much you have the ability to, if a device is, let's say, infected, you have the ability to, quarantine that device. You have the ability to run, a malware check on a certain device that has been, deemed, infected, and pretty much, clean up that device. So, story short is that we have several solutions that pretty much can share intelligence with each other and work in a very symbiotic, manner, in the sense that, if there's any sort of like, security loopholes within your infrastructure, if there's any sort of like, issues you're trying to address, from physical layer all the way up to the cloud, or all the way up to applications you have, either, within your infrastructure or outside the infrastructure, the whole idea behind the fabric is to ensure that, we protect your network, we protect, your assets, and ensure that you also have that, smooth experience, for business operations. So, this is just pretty much a slide that, explains how, the perimeter is pretty much borderless, right? You have several, people bringing in BYOD devices, you have several IoT devices within your infrastructure, you have several, access devices, wireless devices, you have virtual appliances. So these days, it's very difficult for you to, pretty much say, hey, this is where my perimeter stops, because ingress or egress traffic can traverse your network either, north to south or east to west. So, when you're trying to address this, question of, tracking how traffic is traversing your environment and ensuring that you have the necessary, visibility, into that traffic, and as well, you have the necessary security to ensure that your users are, are protected. There are a few things that pretty much you need to, have in mind. Initially, the first generation of, solution required you having a stateful firewall. So a stateful firewall primarily would say, hey, you have access to, X and Y assets, right? And if you don't have access, you get blocked right away. Then, next generation, which a lot of people use these days, would pretty much, give you the application visibility, give you that granular, ability to apply a certain, application inspection, web filtering inspection, things like IPS. And, what Fortinet is leading the way in right now is in the advanced, protection space, right? Because application visibility would take you to a certain level in terms of, protection. But what about, something that hasn't been detected? What about something that hasn't been seen before, right? How are you protecting those systems? How is, your infrastructure, communicating with each other, right? Uh, is your firewall, able to communicate with your, web application firewall? Is it able to communicate with endpoint protection that you have within your infrastructure? Is it able to communicate with, your access points to determine people coming out from the access layer, identifying those devices, identifying those users, or if they're part of a security group, right? Do you have that visibility, to apply security measures to ensure that, your applications are protected?
Emeka, we cannot hear you. Hello?
Yeah. Did I lose?
Okay. Yeah, I think there was some network problem, I guess. You can share your screen again so that everyone can see your screen.
Oh, how long was I offline for?
Oh, it was just like 15 seconds, I think.
All right. Are we live now?
Yes.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. I think we lost connection right there for a second. So,
No worries.
going back to, the fabric, right? um, the key vision, behind the fabric is the fact that, is broad, right? It's powerful, it's automated. How is it broad? You have deeper, like I mentioned earlier, visibility and control. And with that visibility, you can pretty much reduce the attack surface, within your infrastructure, talking about IoT devices, all the way to the cloud. In a future slide, I have a few, visuals that pretty much will give you, a perspective of how we can, identify, IoT devices, how you can, segregate different IoT devices depending on, their risk level, right? Part of the fabric being broad, like I mentioned, is the visibility, the coverage in the sense that you have a solution available in public cloud, in in the private cloud infrastructure. We have application security, products. We have network security products. If you're looking at access layer protection, we have our switches, we have our access points, and the good thing about it is, they all talk to each other. And the foundation of the fabric, especially, it's our FortiGate device, which is our firewall. Within a single device itself, it can act as a wireless controller. It can act, as a switch controller, eliminating the need for you to have multiple, management consoles, right? Or trying to educate yourself on how to, apply certain, security controls within your infrastructure. Because from a single firewall itself, you can snoop into, VLANs, from the firewall, because the firewall is a switch controller. You can look into several SSIDs and see if there are any sort of like rogue APs connected to that SSID. You can see if there's, some sort of like, MAC address, attacks occurring, within certain segments, of your VLAN within your infrastructure. And even at the client level, we have our FortiClient that also integrates with the firewall. The FortiClient is an endpoint protection tool. The good thing about the FortiClient is, the way it integrates with not just the firewall, but our FortiSandbox. Within the client itself, you can create, a configuration such that if a user tries to download a malformed, payload or file, we have the ability to, pretty much stop that user from downloading the file until we get a verdict, on that file's behavior, because we don't know what that user is trying to download, right? We don't know if it's like a USB drive they're putting into your system that's trying to make registry changes or whatnot. We have that granular control into different endpoints, into different IoT devices, and primarily taking the necessary actions, to ensure that, we are protecting you, and as well ensuring that there are no loopholes within your infrastructure. The last part of the fabric is, it's open. We have API integration, with several, vendors out there. We integrate with Carbon Black, with their endpoint solution. We integrate with VeloCloud for SD-WAN. We integrate with Cisco ACI, right? Then we also have other products like our FortiSIM product, which is, vendor agnostic. It helps you with, mapping out or correlating certain performance metrics or certain, forensic, behaviors within devices that report to, the SIM tool itself. So, part of the fabric is, its broad nature and the coverage that you have, with our solution, and extending further, with our FortiSIM, which is vendor agnostic. We can tie into, different vendor devices, and as well, help you correlate, certain metrics as it relates to performance, as it relates to availability, as it relates to forensic analysis. So, we do more than just integrating with our solution and extend further to other, third-party vendors. So just looking at, how you can realize a security fabric, and just giving you a very, high level visual, for basic, let's say, let me call it like an enterprise, infrastructure or deployment, with, sort of business critical and customer facing, applications that could be housed maybe in a private cloud, in a data center, along with a campus or like a branch, or even if you have remote employees, just giving you a scenario of like an enterprise deployment. Usually, like I mentioned, the common starting point, for most enterprise in realizing the vision of the Fortinet Security Fabric is, a Fortinet Enterprise Firewall, right? You can deploy this firewall, at any point of your network. You can deploy it at the edge. You can have it sitting behind, your layer three router, or behind your layer two switch. If you're doing things like internal network segmentation, you can also deploy our infrastructure in the public cloud, right? We have licenses for Azure. We have licenses for Amazon Web Services. And the good thing about this is, it's not like if you purchase a firewall appliance, you'd have any different, behavior or feature than you would with a cloud, offering. Pretty much everything is, synonymous in terms of the look and feel, in terms of the security updates that you get. So you wouldn't be worried about maybe the learning curve or that transition from a physical appliance to the cloud. Everything pretty much is the same. OS is the same, definitions that you get. So, that transition will pretty much be seamless. You know, um, Seen situations where people have deployed a solution in, both a virtual appliance and, a cloud or public cloud infrastructure for login purposes or for management purposes. And they have a physical appliance because they want to take advantage of, of our custom security processing units, because it gives you or it drives that performance when it comes to content inspection, and when it comes to network, security inspection. So, the whole idea primarily is, in terms of deployment, be it private cloud, public cloud, we can fit easily in that, environment. And on top of that, you can also apply, advanced threat protection, right? You're talking about a sandbox solution. You can deploy a sandbox solution in the public cloud. You can deploy it as a virtual appliance. You can also deploy it as a physical appliance. And the good thing about it as well is that it scales, seamlessly, right? You can have, multiple devices report to a single sandbox device. You don't have to purchase, multiple licenses for, pretty much just one single for the sandbox device, right? You have the ability to, tie in, for the sandbox to the cloud as well, for SMB customers. There's that ability for you to, do some sort of like sandboxing inspection whereby it points it to a cloud account and gives you a clean forensic analysis of the file, if it notices something out of the ordinary, and alerts you if there's any, malformed behavior within, your infrastructure. So, I talked about visibility, and the reason why, I really keep hammering on visibility is the value you get from this. I mean, if you don't see the threats, how can you protect, against those threats, right? I mean, imagine a network where every so often, you have to, build out a network diagram. You have to understand where those assets are located, and even imagine a complex environment where you have, multiple devices, maybe from a single vendor, or even multiple devices from multiple vendors, right? I mean, how would you have that visibility of dynamic changes that occurs, maybe within your data center or within the cloud, right? Um, Fortinet Fabric addresses, that question, right? Within FortiView, you have both a physical, topology view of your network in terms of where different assets are spread out within your infrastructure, be it IoT devices, be it, native Fortinet appliances, or even non-Fortinet appliances. We have, the ability to fingerprint different devices, apply unique attributes to specific devices to understand the nomenclature of that device, and as well, ingest certain information about that device as it relates to things like the MAC address, the IP address, how much bandwidth that device is taking up, what that device is directly connected to, right? How traffic is traversing your infrastructure via that specific device itself, both on a trusted, network or even an untrusted network, right? Even if the user is, on your local LAN, or even if that traffic is traversing, outbound your network, we have that visibility, from a topology standpoint, right? This is not you looking into a log, right? This is you having that visual metric that pretty much brings things together, right, from a visual standpoint. And this is very important, right? Like as a system engineer, I remember, every so often I'd have to, look into the devices, look into the systems, ensure that, I update, different devices that I have included within my infrastructure or different devices that I have, pulled out, right? But with the fabric, we address that concern, right? We're able to keep, track, in real time of what devices or assets are logged into your network, what devices or assets are off your network. So that's part of the value in terms of the visibility and improved segmentation, that you get with the fabric. And this is just pretty much a slide, going deeper, into what I've described, in terms of uniquely identifying, either IoT devices or endpoint devices within your infrastructure. We can, determine what OS is running on that device itself, what kind of hardware it is, who the manufacturer of that hardware is, if that device is actually connected to your network, right? The location of that device relative to the firewall, maybe your egress firewall or a network segmented firewall. So, that visibility helps you, reduce the attack surface, or if there's a threat, it helps you take the necessary steps to address that threat in a timely manner. Instead of you going through a whole bunch of, logs and trying to, understand what's going on within your infrastructure, from a single pane of glass, you can drill down into different devices. You can drill down into different endpoints, quarantine that device right away if that device is infected, and pretty much, take the necessary steps to, audit that device, or, run like a malware tool inspection on that device itself. This is just another slide highlighting what I just mentioned earlier. And like I said, part of the fabric is, our integration with, multiple vendors out there, right? We integrate with Cisco, we integrate with, these are just a few vendors that we integrate with. We integrate with, Carbon Black, Ziften, Tufin, for network management, right? If you're looking at an infrastructure where you can create things like, policies from a central repository and push out those policies to different devices. If you're looking at managing several firewalls, within Tufin, we have a plugin, where it integrates with our firewall, and customers who utilize Tufin, can pretty much integrate with, with our security fabric. And this involves, multiple certifications, right, to become a fabric ready partner. It's not really an easy endeavor. We do a lot of, QA with some of these partners that we work with, just to ensure that, we're all on the same page in terms of our goals of, providing a very, tightly woven, security architecture that protects, the entire threat landscape. Now the other attribute of the fabric is that it's powerful, right? It's powerful in the sense that, we have, several, appliances, that scale from SMB all the way to enterprise. If you're looking at carrier grade devices, um, and one of our claim to fame is, a security processing unit. This security processing unit separates us from other vendors out there. And what this does primarily is, they have different, customized processors that have specific tasks as it relates to things like content processing, right? If you're looking at, IPS inspection, right? If you're trying to, accelerate things like DLP, or if you're talking about encryption, right? IPsec, VPN tunnels, right? Cipher decryption and things like that. Things that really come, to value. For example, if you have an IPsec VPN connection, and this is pretty much validated by, third-party testing in terms of our performance. We don't just, publish the numbers out there, but these numbers have been tested by NSS Labs. They've been tested by ISCA and validated in terms of what we put on our product sheet. And the value of the ASICs, like I said, is accelerating these processes and ensuring that you don't compromise security for performance, right? Some customers would avoid turning on things like SSL inspection because it takes up a lot of processes within the CPU, or turning on things like IPS because it chews up resources. So you don't have to worry about that. That is pretty much um, the fact that we are an engineering company, and ensuring that we stay in tune with Moore's law, that every so often that computing power is always going to double. And as such, we ensure that we provide that technology. We provide the hardware necessary to address growth within the security space. um, and not only just physical hardware devices, even within the cloud, right? We have our infrastructure that can pretty much scale, depending on how many vCPUs you're trying to deploy. Even unlimited vCPUs we support for multiple platforms. The major hypervisors would be vSphere, KVM, Citrix. We pretty much ensure that we are in that space, and we are pretty much a major player in that space as well, with multiple certifications by Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. And going back to performance, I mean, I feel it's very important, right? Because a lot of vendors will tell you, hey, like our device can push X and Y throughput, but when you really put that device to work, you notice that that's not the case, right? And like I said, we have dedicated security processing units, that help with network processing, that help with content processing, and pretty much offloads that task from the CPU itself, right? We are the only vendor right now that has a 1 terabyte firewall device. And this security processing unit, pretty much scales from an entry level device all the way up, to a high level device, right? And just a quick highlight of the security processing unit, right? Recently released CP9. The value you get from the CP9, 15 times more efficient. You're looking at SSL boost. You're looking at pattern matching if you're doing things like DLP, right? Your standard Intel Xeon would give you X amount of performance. Off the shelf processor will give you not so much performance, because those processors are not programmed to handle specific tasks. With our ASICs, or with our security processing units, we have individual content processors, network processors, programmed specifically to handle certain traffic, programs specifically to handle certain tasks. Like I mentioned, things like intrusion prevention, right? Things like SSL inspection. Those tasks can be offloaded to a specific processor, and take off that heavy load from the CPU itself. So this is just so I think I saw a question coming. I'm going to get back to that question after my presentation. So this is just a slide that shows you over a period of like 3 years, the progression that we've made. We had the CP9, and pretty much it shows you in terms of the value, in terms of how much power consumption you're saving, in terms of the gate count, right? Then if you look at the technology itself, right, pretty much a CP9 ASIC stands out. and it stands out, from a performance, benchmark. Right, I told you our numbers. We test every year, and this is not plug and play, testing. This is third party, validated testing by NSS Labs. Right, we throw in our devices, and ask them, hey, go at it, you know, um, run your, enterprise mix traffic through our device and tell us what performance you see. And every year, we've always hit the mark, right? We've always performed very well, right? If you look at the VPN performance, with CP9, it's way, way higher than what you get with like with the CPA, right? Then, if you look at it compared to a standard CPU, right, it's not anywhere close. It's almost, six times or even over six times more in terms of the SSL VPN performance you get, right? IPS inspection performance, right? Or if you're doing things like SSL inspection, right? You can see how much performance you get from utilizing, our SPUs. And this is just a slide that shows you some of the, the ciphers that we support. Uh, So we're able to, like I said, look into the ciphers, pretty much using our algorithms, break down certain processes within, those ciphers and, accelerate, certain calls, that would occur behind the scenes for things like SSL handshakes or, key encryption or key exchange, things like that. Then this is pretty much a slide that shows you, our real testing numbers, right? What exactly are we looking at when we, do an SSL inspection test within our device? So this is with, a stateful firewall turned on and IPS turned on. Other vendors wouldn't really publish their numbers. We don't know how it's validated either, right? And we are pretty much, the only vendor out there that publishes how we actually do the SSL, testing behind the scenes. Like I said, we do our testing with stateful firewall traffic and enabled and IPS, enabled as well. So, like I mentioned, with our ASICs, they pretty much scale from an entry-level device. A very good device would be a 60 or 80E device. Very good for distributed network environment. If you have branch offices trying to connect, via VPN to a data center, very good device that can help you with IPsec, throughput. With a 60E, you're looking at roughly 3 gigs of IPsec throughput, more than enough, for, distributed branch network. And if you're looking at a mid-range device, right, we also have the 200E. The 200E will give you a stateful firewall. Will give you a NG firewall throughput of roughly 1.2 gigs, which is, a very huge, bump performance from the previous 200D that, was close to roughly about, I believe, 300 megabits of throughput. So, like I said, the whole value, of the ASICs is, pretty much helping us, accelerate performance. And as such, you don't have to worry about, what security inspection you have to, do, on the firewall, right? You don't have to worry about turning on certain services within the firewall itself. You can also deploy, firewalls, in data center. We have, 1 terabyte firewall. We have a few optimized, chassis devices, right? Looking at 100 gig devices, so across the spectrum, right? From entry level, all the way up to, the enterprise or even carrier grade devices. We have something available there whereby you don't have to worry about, compromising for, security when it comes to performance. So the other strong, suit of the fabric is that it's automated. So what that means primarily is You have the ability to, gain threat intelligence, right, from our FortiGuard device. You can coordinate, login within, different devices that are part of the fabric, right? You can run audits within different Fortinet devices that are part of the fabric. So that audit will pretty much, segregate, your network within, critical, or certain metrics like if, this device is high risk, low, medium, or if it's passed, right? So we can, do an audit, looking out for certain indicators of compromise, or probably, certain best practices that we will, encourage, in certain customers for things like, compliance, like PCI compliance, or if you want to stay within, HIPAA compliance, certain, you know, um, uh, features that would need you to enable within the firewall itself to make sure your device is properly, locked down, right, from the edge to, endpoints that you have. I talked about global intelligence, right? Everything is all centralized by a FortiGuard team. If there's a threat all the way in, say, Russia or whatever, right, and we detect, a signature, we can push that signature right away to all our devices globally, right? If we notice some sort of indicator of compromise within, our sandbox infrastructure, we can push our signatures on the fly right away to, our FortiGate devices, right? And that can trickle down, across the network to other FortiGates that you have, right? So that global intelligence has helped us a lot, right? In terms of, converging our security infrastructure, and in terms of ensuring that, when there is, an occurrence of a certain threat, like WannaCry, we can easily and quickly, push out updates, from a global standpoint, or even from a local standpoint with the Forti Sandbox, and as such, distribute that globally as well too. And with that tight integration comes, a single pane of glass, where from, a central repository, right, be it FortiGate, which is primarily the foundation of the fabric. The FortiGate can act as a wireless controller or switch controller, or even a FortiManager, that has some knock functionality, right? Or pretty much giving you the ability to manage multiple, Fortinet assets, right? Pushing policies out, doing things like, zero touch deployment, right? Pushing, even FortiGuard updates out to different devices, right? If you have a closed network, you can easily utilize a FortiManager, as a Fortinet distribution server, and push out updates to, those assets, so Fortinet assets that probably don't have access to, to the internet. So that is the power, of the fabric. The fact that from a single pane of glass you can apply security control. You don't have to worry about, complexity in terms of managing, or in terms of understanding the technology, or in terms of understanding the operating system. Everything is primarily the same. The look and feel is primarily the same. You don't have to worry about,
Hello? We cannot hear you again. Hi, Emeka, we cannot hear you. Yes.
did,
Hello?
yeah, did I lose you?
Yeah, again, just like a few seconds ago, but
Oh, I apologize about that. I think we're running into some technical issues again.
it's okay.
Right. So, in closing or in summary, the fabric is broad. You have that deep visibility into your assets. It's powerful because it scales from public cloud, private cloud, even with our appliance itself, entry level devices all the way to carrier grade devices. You don't have to compromise security for performance. It is automated because from a single pane of glass, you can push out security definitions. You can pretty much create policies and, push out those policies to different devices, right? And use a Forti manager, utilize the knock functionality within the Forti manager to have that centralized view of different assets that you have, within the fabric. So, in nutshell, you don't need to compromise, security with performance, because the fabric is broad, powerful, and automated. Real quick, Avani, do we have any questions there? I don't think I can see the questions, but I saw a few things coming.
Okay. Yeah, there are two questions by Warren Fresh. So he's asking that can Fortinet use SNMP to control other vendors' switches or network hardware, or is this a situation where we're trying to sell all new hardware to get the new security features?
So, within the device itself, you can pretty much push out, SNMP trap. If you have an SNMP device, you can easily ingest that information from the FortiGate itself. Can you repeat the last part? I think I missed the last part of the question that you asked.
So can Fortinet use SNMP to control other vendor switches or network hardware? Or is this a situation where we're trying to sell all new hardware to get the new security features?
Right. So you cannot use a FortiGate device to manage other switches. Primarily, you would only manage our own switches with the FortiGate device. Same would apply to our access point. You can't manage other third-party vendor access points from our FortiGate. But on the other hand, if you have a third-party switch hooked up to our FortiGate device, we would have visibility into that device, understanding the nomenclature, the vendor in some instances, right? We can ingest information as it regards to the MAC address. What else? The IP address, of that device itself, and we can apply policies, to certain VLANs that sit behind that switch, right? Even if it's a Fortinet switch or a third-party switch. But in terms of managing, and doing things like SNMP, you wouldn't be able to integrate as such, with third-party devices, things like switches or access points.
Okay, and then there is another question. How much of this can small businesses afford? For clients where the FG60D was appropriate size, is any of this in the budget framework for the smaller customers?
Right. Can you repeat that question one more time, please?
Sure. How much of this can small businesses afford? For clients where the FG60D was appropriate size, is any of this in the budget framework for the smaller customers?
Yes. So the 60 Echo E is a direct replacement for the 60D. So the 60 Echo would have better hardware. It would have the CP9. It would have the CP9 Lite as opposed to the 60D that has the CP8 Lite. So meaning that better performance when it comes to SSL inspection, IPsec inspection, threat protection throughput, right? And around the same price point, maybe the difference is almost negligible in terms of the price. So the 60E would, be pretty much, play in, an SMB deployment or a distributed branch network, infrastructure, an environment where you have roughly close to 25 users uh, or user devices. You can easily deploy the 60E. Then we also have another good SNMB device, the 80E, the 80 Echo, also a direct replacement for the 80D and the 90D. Plays very well, in the SNM is in the SMB space. So if you have roughly between 50 to 70 user devices, the 80 Echo would be, a very good, device that you want to look into. And like I said, in terms of the price point, it's almost, negligible in that regard.
All right, hope that answered your question. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box or the chat box. And we're just going to wait for a couple more minutes here. And until then, let me share my screen again. Okay, meanwhile, let me show you our sales territory map. So if you have any questions or concerns, you may directly contact your regional sales rep and they will be more than happy to answer those for you. And thank you again, Emeka, for taking your time out to present and educate our partners.
Sure, you bet.
I believe there are no more questions, so let me go ahead and also show you our partner portal. It takes about a couple minutes to register, and once you have access to our partner portal, you can have access to our resources like Webcast Wednesday, the previous FindTech webinars and presentations along with the recording. Also the vendor partner resources, which will have access to all the Fortinet solution brief, partner promotions, and then you can also have access to the partner process improvement under Fortinet resources, the new renewal guide that Fortinet just came out with. So again, it only takes a couple of minutes to register. And then if you have any additional questions related to marketing services, you can contact me at marketing@findtech.com. So now we're going to jump on to, before that, our next webinar. So also our next webinar will provide your enterprise customers a streamlined path to NFV. In this introductory webinar with Array Networks, we will discuss Network Functions Platform, Network Functions, Array Product Portfolio, and Array Total Value. And the webinar is on June 21st at 10 a.m. PST. Now it's time for raffle drawings. I have everyone's name on here, and I'm going to do a final drawing for 2 people to win a $25 Amazon gift card. All right, Warren Frosch and Kurt Witter, congratulations on winning the $25 Amazon gift card. I will later email you with your e-code. And once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We will see you on June 21st with a webinar with Array Networks. Thank you.
Thank you.